everyone, it's Amanda, and I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in January. So, you're going to notice something different than usual this month. Something happened to me, and I started reading a lot. And it was basically after I read Twice Shy, I just started reading way more than usual. And instead of bumming around on my phone, I started reading, like, a lot. And it has been absolutely lovely. As a result, I finished 8 books in January. Normally I finish 2. So this is going to be a longer video than usual because, yeah, big difference between 2 versus 8. Now, 2 of the books I read I will not be talking about today because I already talked about them in my December wrap-up. And that is Lady Sophie's Christmas Wish by Grace Burrowes and Twice Shy by Sarah Hogle. So if you want to know about those, they're last month because I had finished them right at the beginning of the year. Now, let's get on to what I read after. So let's start with the physical books. First one I read was The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Erin Morgenstern wrote The Night Circus, which is one of my favorite books. I love that book. It's like she is really, really great at description and really drawing you in and creating a very vivid picture with her books. Because this book also does that. So if you're into vivid description and amazing, like, this one has a super fairy tale feeling. So the basic premise is it revolves around a character named Zachary Ezra Rollins, and his full name is mentioned at the beginning of almost every chapter. And what happens is he's a grad student, and he's an avid reader, and he comes across a book in the library, and it's a book that has no author. There's nothing particularly identifying about it. It isn't in the system properly or anything. And they're trying to the librarian's trying to figure out what's going on with this book, but she figures out enough and lets him check it out. So he starts reading this book, and it's kind of a bunch of disjointed stories. And in one of the stories, he realizes that it's about him and something that happened to him when he was a child. And the intrigue goes from there. This is a book for book lovers. It's very and fairy tales, like I mentioned before. It has this very mystical, magical quality to it. And it's absolutely lovely. I really enjoyed it. It does start to it slogged a little bit for me. Well, slogged is the wrong word. None of it was a slog. I read it, for me, very quickly, considering that it's a longer book. It's almost 600 pages. It's 575-ish range, I think. And normally this kind of book would have taken me all month, but because I started reading more and I started really actively reading a lot, I read it in 11 days, I think, which again, for me, was impressive. So anyway, it does get more out there, I guess. More, everything starts to kind of turn on its head and go kind of crazy after maybe the last third-ish of the book. So that's just something to keep in mind. I didn't dislike it at that point. It's just, I have to say I preferred the first 2/3 to the last third, but that's fine. As a whole, I still really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend it, especially if you love The Night Circus. The next physical book I finished was Abhorsen by Garth Nix. So this is the 3rd book in, the Old Kingdom trilogy. Now, I had read, the first ones are Sabriel and Lyriel. I had read them a long time ago. So it was a big gap. Also, he's written 2 more books since this, so it's not technically a trilogy anymore. But there was a big gap of at least 10 years, I believe, between this book and the next book, which I do eventually plan on reading. And there's some other, stories and books and whatnot, novellas. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. This is the 3rd one, so it's kind of hard to tell you what it's about without spoilers. So I'll try to be as vague as possible. It's basically a continuation of Lyriel with Lyriel and Sam trying to figure out what they can do because they know that something really bad's going to happen, and that if some certain things happen, that it's going to bring back this like super scary dude who's going to destroy everything. We'll just say that it's fantasy plot. Now, I have to say I absolutely loved this book. Like, this was the first 5-star read I've had in a long time. I just loved it so much. It's so funny. I liked Sabriel a lot, and I liked Lyriel too, but this one, everything like comes together, and it was good. I loved it so much. It makes me highly recommend the trilogy now because it all kind of comes together. The ending is like 90% happy, 10% bitter. Just heads up, it's not like a super, but the ending hit me hard, like hard. I have not enjoyed an ending of a series, and we're going to call it the ending of the series, even though it's not technically. I haven't had one hit me that hard in a long time. Like, I'm getting teary-eyed just thinking of it. I loved it so much. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. I'm definitely going to continue on this series. I don't have the 2 next books. I will get them at some point, but next physical book, last physical one that I read, is Breadcrumbs by Anne Ursu. So this one is basically a fairy tale retelling of the Snow Queen. This one is like a middle grade book. I've had it sitting on my shelves forever. This one's about a girl named Hazel, and she has a best friend named Jack. Things are going rough for Hazel. Her parents have split. She had to switch schools. She hates her new school. She does not do well there. Her mind wanders. Jack is like her rock. Like, he is the thing that makes her keep going. And then one day, Jack disappears, and she only has some vague clues about what happened to him. And so from there, it becomes more of an adventure tale of her trying to save Jack. And this one, it's honestly harder hitting than I expected. I felt so bad for Hazel. Things are so hard for that girl. Middle school is a rough time as it is, and it's got to be even worse, like, for the situation she's in. And the story does a really good job of explaining how she feels, and oh man, poor Hazel. And then it does have, there's a strong element of this one with things aren't what they seem. So just something to keep in mind with this one. I really enjoyed it. It has a nice ending, but it's kind of a little open-ended in some ways. Definitely an enjoyable book. I would recommend it for people who like middle grade. If you are a kid who middle grade would be appropriate for. It's still too old for my kids at this point, but I thought it was a good book. Now let's go to my digital books that I read on my Kindle. So this is all, I believe all of these are romance. Yes, they're all romance from here on out. First one I read Against a Wall by Cate C. Wells. So this is an interesting book in that I feel like so this book is written as if it's like a writing prompt where Cate C. Wells tried to write the douchiest hero possible and yet make us still love him. And that is who Cash Wall is. Basic premise of this one is it features Glenna and Cash. Glenna is very unpopular with the town because her father exposed the local sheriff with some very scandalous But she put her name on the article, so everyone hates Glenna. And meanwhile, we've got Cash, who is Glenna's bully from high school. He was real awful to her. But, of course, it's because he secretly loves her. After seeing how people have been treating Glenna and feeling very worried and nervous for her welfare, Cash suggests that they fake date because everyone loves him and he wants to protect her. There you go. I really enjoyed this. I like... Cash is very lovable. He's not the smartest. He would be a himbo if he were a nicer person, basically. But I appreciate that he also is willing to learn. And meanwhile, we've got Glenna, who's a grump, but I still liked Glenna. Like, there's nothing particularly bad about her, except for some of her stubbornness at the end is a little much. And it's also pretty, I enjoyed the spice level as well. It was a good spicy. So I recommend it if you like romance novels. The next book I read was Take a Hint, Dani Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the second one with the Brown sisters. The first one was Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So this one's Dani. Dani is an academic, and she has a friendship with the security guard at the building. He's not even like a guard per se, but he's like, we'll call him a security guy. And it turns out he's actually an ex-rugby player. And one day there's a drill. She gets like a fire alarm drill. She gets stuck in the elevator, and he carries her out, and people just think it's so charming. And so they decide to fake date because fake dating is just the thing to do. I really enjoyed this one. I liked it more than the first. I liked Dani because she's very upfront about what she wants, and I appreciate that. It is totally fine to not want a relationship if you're nice and upfront about it. And then the guy is Zafir. He's an ex-rugby player, and he's very grumpy seeming, but he's a hopeless romantic. He actually likes to read romance novels, which is really cute. I like this one. They're both grumpy. It's not like Grumpy Sunshine. It's like Grumpy, which I think was cute, and it works out really well. And I loved Zafir. I love him. He is such a good guy. And I liked how the book handled things. He makes a mistake, and he's very good at acknowledging what his mistake was. But at the same time, he's clearly also a very good person. And I thought that worked. I really enjoyed it. It's very sweet. Good amount of spice, too. So, recommend. The last one I read was The Soldier by Grace Burrowes. It's just it's a stereotypical cover. It's, not worth it. This is part of the Wyndham series. I've read 3 of the other Wyndham books. I've read The Heir, Sophie's, and I've also read Louise's. So, this is the second book in the series. The Soldier is about Devlin St. Just, who is the Duke of Moreland's eldest son. However, he's illegitimate. So, but he ends up getting a courtesy title or buying a title. I don't know. He gets a title somehow. He's now an earl. Okay, great. And then the main love interest is a lady named Emmy. So when Devlin moves into his new digs, he runs across a little girl named Winnie. Winnie is also an illegitimate child of the previous earl of the place that he's bought. And Emmy is her cousin who takes care of her. Okay. So that's the whole, and then, he decides he's going to take care of this kid. She's his responsibility now, which kind of fair enough because Emmy clearly wasn't doing a good job because Winnie was just running around all over the place. And that's the basic premise. I didn't really like this one. This was not. So, all right. I feel I'm going all over the place, but hear me out. I DNF'd another book, which I should probably talk about the fact that I DNF'd another book. I skipped over it. But I DNF'd a book because it was insta-lust. Like, second chapter, it was like a Regency era, but second chapter they're making out. No, I'm not even going to tell you what book it was. It doesn't, we don't need to talk about it. I don't do insta-lust. This one wasn't much better. I managed to finish it, but it wasn't great. Emmy sucks. Like, she is just, ugh. She doesn't take good care of the kid in the first place, okay? And then she just lets herself, she gets bossed around by St. Just, whatever, fine. And then she is the weepiest person. She just won't tell him the truth about anything. And this is a recurring theme in these books, is that the characters, usually the women, have some kind of secret that they just don't tell for like the longest time, and it becomes a big old problem because they won't tell the secret. And it's this big manufactured conflict. It happens every single one of them so far. I knew that this was going to happen in this one. I just knew it. But it was especially annoying, this one, because Emmy was just all over the place. This girl was like all over him one minute, super cold another, very, very stubborn, like, I can't do this, I need to move out, even though he's proposed to her, like, everything could be fine. Not only that, but another guy proposed to her. Like, there's another, and he's a nice, good-looking guy too. Like, how many guys does this one horrible chick need? Like, she sucked. Just ridiculous. And then to top it off, like, St. Just is honestly awesome. He's a really good guy. And I appreciated that he just kind of let her do her thing because she was her own drama, and he was miserable about it, but he was like, whatever, crazy, you do your own thing. If you're going to be stubborn, you're going to be stubborn. But the first intimate scene between the two of them, he was pushy in an uncomfortable way. And I get it. I forget when this was written, but the consent is different in some of the older books. I'm not saying it's okay. Your mileage may vary on how you feel about it, okay? It made me uncomfortable, the way he behaved. And he's like a saint, St. Just. He is honestly saintly the rest of the book. He's such a good guy. But, like, I was super uncomfortable during that one chapter in this intimate scene. He was very pushy, and it's like, dude, she keeps protesting, just be like, okay, fine, bye. You know what I mean? Like, don't go into her game. Like, she crazy, just don't. So, no. I just, there was a lot that I didn't like about this book. It just... Now, what did I actually like? I liked the male friendships because St. Just was friends with another guy named Douglas Amory, and that friendship was actually great. In fact, I think it would have been a better novel if he had been the love interest, to be quite frank. And he also has a good friendship with his much younger brother, Valentine. I like Valentine. He's actually the focus of the next book, but I have mixed feelings because so far the books are very in the first place, and the male books have been worse, so I'm nervous about it. But anyway, so be it. And that's about what I liked about it. It's this one is spice level, like, I'd say decently spicy. It's not as spicy as the other two books I talked about today, but there's a decent amount of spice to it. So these are like not as good Bridgerton novels, basically. I know, I'm sorry. I know that's not very nice, but they're not as good. And I know there's stuff that's way better than Bridgerton too, for that matter. So the reason I picked this book is I figured it would be a solid 3-star read. I knew what I was getting going into it, but it ended up being honestly, as a whole, unfortunately. It is what it is. Sometimes things just don't, they just don't work out the way you want. And this was one of those situations. So that's finally it. Sorry that took so long. It's just there were way more books than usual. I'm not used to reading this many books. I got interrupted like 500 times because my son got upset about something, then the dogs needed to come in. It's exhausting. It's over. So I hope you all are doing well, and see you next month. We'll see if I keep up this voracious appetite of reading I've got going on. Bye.